complicated that really a tiny percentage of the anglers are ever going to master the little tiny tricks that are required to be successful on a regular basis doing that. The two ways, there's actually three ways that I tarpon fish, although I hate to admit that I actually fish deadbait on the bottom. And I don't very often do it because I do not have a love affair with catfish. And if you're going to chunk fish tarpon, if you're going to fish deadbait on the bottom, you have that, a catfish is going to be your mistress. You're going to spend more time with catfish than you spend with your wife, your sons, and your daughters. And I don't like it. They have hurt me and hurt me and hurt me no matter how I've tried to stay away from them. I don't know how they do it, but they just regularly get me. So I don't, orange beak turns, I've got to admit, the new crazy sea that has got the orange beak and it's a turn. And if you're trying to fish sardines on the flat, it's the one that'll be 40 feet in the air and dive on your bait and go out of sight to catch your bait. And then he flies off. I don't like them too much either. I'm not in their fan club. But I'm going to talk a little about, I'm going to talk mostly about what I know the most about, and then I'm going to talk about what I do live bait fishing to catch them live bait fishing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about chunking, what I know about chunking. I'm not going to tell you that I am the cut dead bait king of tarpon fishing. I hate catfish. And I have never found a way to chunk fish for tarpon without catching every catfish in Tampa Bay or Charlotte Harbor, for that matter. And my experience is that if you can be patient, meaning pick the right bait, throw it as far as you can throw it away from the boat, put the rod in the rod holder, and don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't check the bait. Don't touch it until that rod tip touches the water. Then you got a tarpon. Tarpon will let you know when he's hooked, I promise. But most people can't leave a bait alone. Most can't. And so that's a big part of the reason why I jig fish in Boca Grande Pass, and I have jig fished in Tampa at Egmont Key, and I have caught really big tarpons on jigs at Egmont Key. It's a technique that is not limited to Tampa Bay. Jig fishing for tarpon was first practiced in modern days in the Rio, Colorado and Costa Rica by the inventor, by Harold LeMaster and 4 or 5 of his cronies. They owned the Rio, Colorado Lodge, Silver King Lodge, and they would go down and play with tarpon on artificials long time before Coon Chef and Grand Isle, Louisiana invented a coon pop, or before the modern Boca Grande tarpon jig was developed. Tarpon have always fed on or near the bottom. That's their preferred feeding position, except during a hill tide. Hill tide is the 3 days, or 2 days, really the 2 days before and 3 days after the new and the full moons in May and June and July. And what a hill tide is when the tide and the moon combine to where starting in the afternoon there is a long outgoing tide. The new and the full moons are the most extreme tides of the month. And so a hill tide occurs right around both of those solar periods, and late in the afternoon these bays drain their water out. And so in Mother Nature's plan, at the same time these are occurring, 4 different species of crabs spawn. Blue crab, calico crab, purple leg crab, and what's the correct name for the other one? Pass crab is what they're called. There's a scientific name for them that I'm not familiar with. Now, a purple leg crab is about the prettiest crab I have ever seen. They're beautiful. They're iridescent and all that. And I can't catch a cold using one. But they're beautiful. So I concentrate on catching the three others. The brown crab, which is known as the pass crab, the small blue crab, about that big around, and the calico, which is, it's almost like a snowy white blue crab. It's a real pale white or beige crab. So what happens is, in Mother Nature's plan, the crabs develop, the females develop egg sacs, which are attached to their frame and their arms. Look just like roe in trout or sheephead or any other fish. And this still amazes me, but as the outgoing tide around these new and full moons starts out, then you have what is called a crab flush. And literally from nowhere, I don't know where they come from, hundreds of thousands of crab go offshore with crab flush. And there are times, I have had times in Tampa Bay and times at Boca Grande where you take that dip net right there with a white mesh on it, and you put kids or women or your customers on the boat, and at one raise, there's some of these people that can put a dozen crabs in that net. Now that's all well and good and fun to catch, but you're the captain and you're the leg clipper. And let me tell you something, crabs talk to each other, because if you grab one to cut his claw, his first cousin is going to bite you. And how they know how to bite you, where the claw goes in the quick of your thumb or your finger between the fingernail and the skin on the side, I can't tell you. But I will promise you, it's a better job to be the dipper than it is to be the clipper. So one of the tricks to getting a tarpon to eat one of these tidal flow crabs, I want everybody to remember this. Don't break his claws off. Don't break his claws off. Take a pair of side cutter pliers, just cheap ones, and cut the active claw and leave the fixed claw there. So if you've got a crab that big around and he's got his wings out, he looks more natural than a crab that's got both his main claws cut off. Tarpon's got an eye that big around. If you think they've been in existence just about longer than any remaining alive fish, there are fossilized tarpon right here in the phosphate pits that look essentially exactly like, just a second, I will, essentially exactly like today's tarpon. They are here because they have adapted to their environment and they notice little details, in my experience. And I watch every rod. I watch every rod. I get more strikes on a tidal crab or a pass crab that has its claws attached than I do with the claws broken off. So if you'll just take the crab, take a pair of side cutters, and real quick clip the active thing, then he can't get you anymore. You know, and just put him back in your live well. You had a question, yes sir?
Yeah, I did. When that flush goes on, you grab them. Two questions. The first one is, because I never came across that scenario. What if I took long needle nose pliers and just snap?
No, so that doesn't work. When you
no, not to kill the claw, just so he has no power at all.
Typically, if you grab a crab with a pair of pliers, he'll drop both claws.
I understand. When you you grab him from the tail end, which I still can find. I found out that he can still twist around and grab you and bite you with their claw.
Right.
But if I would take their main cutter, could I ever just snap instead of taking the claw off? Just take needle nose like this really quick. Would that? I
think that's how I take the active, little tiny active. It's only that long. Yeah. The active claw off the arm.
The other thing is when they're flushing like that, which I never came across,
Well, you got to go in the afternoon, and you got to go on an outgoing afternoon tide.
I understand.
And you've got to get. In other words, typically, for whatever reason, these are going to happen around some sort of structure, a bridge particularly.
Yes, and but I never, it was a surprise. I never seen like a lot of birds trying to dive at them.
They don't, because they bite the shit.
Why?
Because they get bit.
Yeah. Okay, that's.
I mean, you're asking the question. In other words, if you ever take a moment to look at a tarpon, he doesn't have teeth. He has no teeth. He has lips that are about that wide and about that deep. And he can clomp on your hand, because I mean, I've handled thousands of them to release them. He is so good with those lips that he can swim up to a crab, take the crab between his lips, and suck the meat out of that crab and turn that crab shell loose without it ever crushing. Now, if you think about that, some of those tarpon, they got mouths as big as that bucket. A 100-pound tarpon's going to have a mouth that big. To be able to handle something, I mean, if you or I grab a crab hard, we're going to crack a shell. And that tarpon can go up and grab it and hold on to that shell and suck the meat out of that shell and turn the crab loose. So how you're going to find a crab flush is to go look for it. And the way, I mean, around Tampa and St. Pete and Apollo Beach, you don't have to look far. There'll be 300 to 500 boats out there doing that when it goes down the next 3 months.
Always on the outgoing tide, fast. At the top of it?
New moon.
Or at the bottom of it?
New moon and a full moon. And May, probably going to happen the full moon that comes up at the end of this month. For sure in May and June and in July.
Now, how do we keep those crabs alive?
In a live well in your boat. Or if you don't have a live well in your boat, you can take a cooler.
I'm talking about like 2 weeks later.
Well, then you better live on salt water. I mean, I don't use a crab that's 2 weeks old. I don't use a crab that's 2 days old. But the way to do it, if you're interested in doing it, is have an insulated cooler, like an igloo or anything like that, and you wet a towel in salt water, and you put that towel in the bottom of that cooler. You don't fill that cooler up with water. You put the towel in the bottom of the cooler, and you take those crabs and you put them in the house with you in the air conditioner. And every 2 days you feed them you put a skinned out fillet of mullet in there with them and let them eat. The problem is when they start eating, they start growing. And so after 3 or 4 days, a lot of times of feeding them, or 3 or 4 times, then their shells get soft and they want to shed their shell and grow another hard shell rather than what you caught him with is a hard shell crab. So I have spent thousands of dollars trying to solve the question that you have got.
So what's your life expectancy on those, most of those past crabs? What do you think? A month?
I would think
year?
I would think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff grows pretty fast.
Yeah.
Month or 2 months, I would think. I mean, I've talked to crabbers and asked that question about blue crabs, and most commercial blue crab guys will say that they think an old crab's a year old.
I know the fiddler crabs, when I do catch them, I know I can't put them in where I thought it was water.
They don't live in the water. They live in the sand.
I know. So I did the same exact thing what you told me. With a garbage paper brown bag.
Yeah,
that'll work. So they don't drown.
Yep.
So they have to come out of the water.
That'll work.
So.
Yep. So they're tidal. They run from the salt water.
They still need water.
They run from salt water, but yes, they're very close to the edge of it. So, yes, sir.
When you fish your crabs, do you put weights on it to get them down?
So that's a good question. And a lot of times, I watch the water. If I see tarpon popping crabs on the top. Popping crabs. It looks like boop, boop, boop. I don't use weight. If I don't see them popping crabs, I mean, you hear people say get a split shot and pinch it on a foot above the line. I'm going to talk about leader here in just a minute, but these, I'll pass these around. These are my actual tarpon rods, okay? That's 60-pound Invisibraid, that is 80-pound Berkeley big game, and that is a 7/0 light wire Mutu circle hook. I never fish J hooks for tarpon. I don't use J hooks for anything. I don't use J hooks, period, not for anything. Every hook on my boat's a circle hook. The reason for that is I am convinced that overwhelmingly it tends to hook in the corner of the mouth. And for snook trout and redfish, we, you know, right now we're in situations where we can't keep a trout over 20 inches, and you can't keep any snook or redfish. And the porpoises are so ravenous that if you release any part of an injured fish, the porpoise is going to have him, and then he'll dog you for the rest of the day. So my intent is to hook a fish, catch him as quickly as you can catch him, and get him released in as good a shape as you possibly can. Because we haven't even brought up the two words bull shark. But bull shark, think tarpon, or potato chips. And if you fight a tarpon for a long time on real light tackle, you can almost guarantee that the bull shark is going to hit him in the middle of the fight, or if not, soon after you release him, because of the buildup of lactic acids in his muscles. And you know, I understand that all of God's creatures have a place, and that it is a big, perfect circle cycle. However, for years and years and years, bull shark populations was kept in line over commercial fishing activity, and then some well-meaning people that in other parts of the world where sharks were particularly, mainly by the Oriental countries, sharks were being slaughtered by the thousands for their fins, and the bodies were being discarded. Well, I mean, if there's no value to the body, what are you going to do with it? But nonetheless, Tampa Bay.
I won. I ain't never won anything. That's great.
Yeah. You notice this bulge on my right hip, don't you? I'm not going to say anything more about it. There you go. Anyhow, Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor are the two largest bull shark nurseries in the world. We have got more bull sharks than anywhere in the world, and every shark scientist will tell you, by far, the bull shark is the most dangerous shark in our saltwater. Far more dangerous than a great white. I don't have a love affair with bull sharks. I've had them eat dozens of tarpon out of my hands. I have on my website, I've got some videos that if you want to see some close encounters between me and sharks, they're there. Anyhow, that goes to using the correct tackle for tarpon fishing. What I have found is that's an 8-foot Crowder spinner rod. I've caught 30-pound gag grouper with it, and I've caught 160-pound tarpon with it. The reason I use an 8-foot rod is because you can get great distance with a very light crab by using the pendulum cast. I don't do the around and around and around, but I do the way I'll show you how I cast it. It gives me great distance. Thank you, sir. Okay. But I also, on occasion, I will use what I call a snook float. It's just a cigar float about that long, and I'll use a 1/4 ounce slip sinker, and I let that sinker slip all the way down to the knot on the hook. I don't pin it above. I let it go all the way down. And then, like I say, I use a float the size of your finger and the length of your index finger. And what I have found is that there's a little tiny black, we call them grenade pins. The pin that goes in that green float. If you look at that pin, there is a hole through the middle of that black pin that goes all the way through it. And what I do, and I found it to be really effective, is I run the leader through the grenade pin. And then the leader goes down, I run the little tiny egg sinker through it, tie the knots you saw on this. I snell some, and then I also use a 4-wrap uni knot. But whatever I do, I pull down with a pair of pliers, so that all of the layers of the knot are right side by side, and there's no whoop, slip, pop deal with it. And what you get there, if you run the leader through the grenade pin, is that when you get ready to cast, the little round sinker and the cork are sitting at your crab on the hook. If you pre-pin or use one of these Cajun, whatever they call it, Cajun Thunder, Cajun Blunder, whatever it is, if you hard pin a float 6 feet from that, then when you cast, that thing is going to rotate as you cast it. And as it rotates, it tends towards the end of the cast to come together. And once you've got a snagged outfit out there, it's of no purpose. So I have found that by running the leader through the grenade pin, when you get to the, you may have not looked, but this is about, this is 40, no, this is 50-pound fluorocarbon right here, tied here. And that knot right there, this knot, connects doubled 60-pound Invisibraid. Spider wire Invisibraid is what I use. It's double. It connects to your leader, but if you look right here, that knot will not go through the hole in the grenade pin. It's a stop. So, depending upon how deep you want to fish the crab is how long you tie the leader. So if you start off with a 6-foot leader and you get bit at 6 feet, then you know that's right. You change your other leaders to that depth. I have found that for a lot of times there is a magic combination of where the fish want to feed. There's a comfort zone. Sometimes it's 6 feet, sometimes it's 2 feet under the surface, sometimes it's free line, sometimes it's a free line with a 1/4 ounce weight on it. Now, in Tampa Bay, there are, I would say, at least half of the tarpon that are caught around the bridges are caught on threadfin herring. And so that, I mean, it amazes me that people call different baits different things. But the preferred snook bait is a scale sardine. That's a scientific name for it. People call them pilchards, people call them whitebait. They are a scale sardine. A thread herring is not a sardine, it's a herring. The colloquial name for that is a greenback. But sometimes people get confused and they call sardines greenbacks. But a thread herring or a threadfin or a thread is the same bait, and it's the one that looks, it is genetically connected to a tarpon. If you look at a threadfin turned sideways, it essentially is a small tarpon. The way the mouth is shaped, the way the I think they call it do they call it a laureal fin? I don't know. I think that's the name.
Sure.
But anyhow, it's the thread that comes off the fin. It's the shape of the bait and all. It is very genetically close to a tarpon. The only way that I can catch a tarpon on a thread fin is either cut diagonally in two and chunked on the bottom, catfishing, or nose hook. And I would say 75% of the snook and redfish and big trout I catch on white bait is belly hook, right here, right at the chest fin. But with tarpon, they want a nose hook bait. And so if you nose hook him and you're careful, and that's why I use a Mutu light wire circle. It doesn't injure that thread fin when you slip that thing through the nasal passage. I don't put it through the eyes, and I don't put it through the meat at the top of the head. I put it just in front of that through the nasal passage. And when I cast them out, I try to do a loft cast. I don't fire the cast to get it as far as you can get it. I kind of roll cast it where it makes a big soft loop and it goes in the water like that. I can't stress enough, don't mess with that bait. When you put that bait out there, put the rod in the rod holder and keep your hands off of it. And if you're anchored at the bridge, just, most of the more successful guides they use, you see them sitting right over here. They're ridiculously expensive, but they're the only anchor that I trust. Is called a sea claw. And they put 6 feet of stainless chain on it and put at least 3/8. And I hate 3-strand rope for pulling an anchor because it just tears your hands to pieces if you pull it fast. I like what is called an 8-plate, which is a braided anchor line. Much more gentle on your hands. And then at the end of it, you've got one of these buoys. I use an alligator buoy. I use one of the ones that a torpedo buoy is about that long. And what you do is on the front of your boat, you have a short piece of anchor line and you have a stainless steel clip. And on your anchor line, the last thing you've got is that float and then a knot and then a loop or a thimble, and your short anchor line goes in the clip, and when you get a strike, you just go up the front of the boat and unclip the anchor, and the float keeps the anchor rope up. And I always put my name on my floats because unfortunately people will steal those things, and if you catch them in the boat with your name on it, then it's game on. And that has happened. And so, but I write my name on it so that it's no question whose anchor ball it is. But the trick to bridge fishing is to try to get the bait where the tide will track that thread fin as close to a bridge piling as you can get. Those tarpon will swim around between the racks of pilings, but they feed against those pilings, in my experience. And I try not to get them to the bottom because, particularly in May, grouper's going to eat it, and I have to turn loose a 24-inch grouper, and it breaks my heart. So I try not to be tempted. Thank you, Lord. I am a Christian. I believe Jesus Christ is my Savior. I don't understand having to turn a grouper loose. I've asked. I don't understand it. I am very, very close to a regular sinner if I get that weight down there too close to the bottom, because he's going to eat it and I'm going to want to eat him. So again, the egg sinkers that I typically employ, the heaviest one I employ is about 3/8 of an ounce. So I use 1/8, 1/4, 5/16, 3/8. I've got a few heavier ones, but I very rarely use them. And I mainly have them because people say, why don't you have a 1/2 inch weight? I do. Just a second. I'll be right to you. Anyhow, so the next thing about tarpon fishing is I watch on TV and I see people set a hook 3 or 4 or 5 times. If you ever set a circle hook more than once, there's an 80% chance you're going to lose the fish. Doesn't matter whether it's a trout, a jack crevalle, a ladyfish, a snook, a redfish, it doesn't matter. If that tarpon takes that bait, he's going to take that rod tip, and that rod tip's going down and the drag's going off. What I encourage my people to do is get the rod out of the boat. Don't ever bring the rod behind your shoulder, but keep it in front of you, and stick him one time if they feel like they've got to strike. Most of the time on these super sharp light wire mutus, you don't have to set it. It's when that tarpon turns and goes, it's going to come in the corner of his mouth. And the crazy thing about it, going back to the jig fishing in Boca Grande, I haven't talked about that yet, and I'm going to. But with a live bait and a circle hook, half the time they're outside in, and half the time they're inside out, and they're in a place that big around in the corner of their mouth. Size of a quarter will cover 90% of the hook placements on a circle hook. And what I like about that is when you get that fish to the boat, it's real easy to get that hook out. Now, I'm going to talk to you about how I handle tarpon when I get them close to the boat. If the sharks are bad at all, when I can grab the leader, I grab the leader and hang on to it. That is an International Game Fish Association recognized catch when the captain is able to touch the leader assembly, including double line and the leader itself. If I know there's sharks around and the sharks are bad, I've got a pair of gloves on, I grab the leader, I say, you've caught him, pop, and he's gone. And if you make that tarpon submit to you, meaning you fight him until he tires out so much that he's on his side, to get him to release, to recover the hook, or have somebody hold the fish down the side of the boat, I think 50% of those fish are eaten. My guess is 50% of them, because when I revive a tarpon, what I do is got both my hands in its mouth, which I am not where I can look for sharks. I'm over the side of the boat. I got both my hands in his mouth. Somebody's driving the boat, and we're pulling the fish forward into the current flow so that the gill water flows into his mouth and out of his gills. If you hold that tarpon's mouth down, that tarpon is going to belch. He's going to burp, just like a beer burp. It's going to be the nastiest thing you ever smelled, because your face is going to be right there. He's going to burp. And when he burps, what he's doing is throwing that lactic acid off. He has started the recovery process in his muscle. As soon as he burps, you're going to feel that tarpon perk up. You hang on to him, and all of a sudden he's swimming with you. And when he starts swimming with me, in other words, I'm not having to drag him, I turn him loose, or her loose. And I don't know how many tarpon we've released alive, but we've released a lot of them. Typically, yes sir, in the back.
Dumb question, maybe. How do you tell the female and the male tarpon?
Okay, well, there's a relatively easy answer to that in May and June. If it's a male, first off, he's going to outfight a female. And second, as he jumps close to the boat, you're going to see a stream of sperm that looks like somebody shot it out of garden hose. Well, I don't know how many tarpon you've caught, but I'm just saying, understand this. During this crab flush deal, I mean, and I don't mean to be base, but it's like there's one honky-tonk in the state of Florida, and all of the pretty girls are there for 5 nights, twice a month for 3 months. So if you're going to get lucky, you're going to be in that honky-tonk. Okay, so the males are all sexed up. And when you exert force against that male and he's all sexed up and he's standing on his tail and shaking, he is going to put on a show with that white milk. And if I keep industrial purple and bleach and a brush on the boat all the time, because if he jumps in the boat or he jumps close to the boat, he will cover the boat in sperm. And you can't stand up on it. You can't. I mean, it is a combination of STP and super glue, because you can't get it off and you can't stand on it. And you have to scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub to get it ever to release. And my thought about that is that these fish are spawning and breeding in the open ocean. And if that sperm doesn't have a strong adhesive, then it has no chance to fertilize an egg. And again, it's an amazing thing to watch, because some of the females tarpon that we catch have got 40 pounds of eggs in them. They look like they have swallowed that float right there in their belly, right on this. There's what we call the giant weeks, are the week before Memorial Day and the week after Memorial Day. That's when the largest tarpon in the world are in Tampa Bay and in Boca Grande Pass. I am fortunate enough to have presented the state of Florida with the largest female tarpon they ever took a DNA sample on live. And the scientists said on the low side 249 pounds and on the high side 276, based on their calculation of the mathematical deal. And so that was an enormous tarpon. That tarpon literally had a basketball in her belly of ripe eggs that she was getting ready to put out. And so you think about how hard it is in a 7-knot current or a 6-knot current, because that's when they dump, to become fertilized. It's an amazing deal. I mean, it truly is. Yes, sir.
It's funny, same thing as from upstate New York into the Hudson River. Same thing with stripers. We call them milking. Same thing with sperm and so forth. It's always the same time of year how Mother Nature does it.
It's all based on moon deal. Yeah, it's all lunar based. It's like the deer rust, the same thing.
And two more things. I want to, I never realized that there's a two.
And that's four times as big as I use.
I use this all the time to feed that thing there. That's a good idea.
But again, I don't use a float that big.
No?
Why? I use the smallest tackle I can possibly use. I don't want that thing.
I usually do, but it's good for sight when.
Again,
tuna fishing
so that we understand.
No, this is for a different thing.
Okay, but it's just like there's a couple of guides in this room. Every guide fishes different.
Yeah.
I want to sneak up on stuff. I've always killed. I don't kill my big deer yelling in the middle of a green field. Hey, I'm here! Come on out! Let me shoot you.
I understand.
The way I catch the biggest is to sneak up on them. So I use the lightest, tightest hook, the lightest, tightest knot combination. It is the tiniest of details that makes the biggest difference.
Here's my question.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, here's my last question about the knot. I was looking at that one. Was it a Palmer or a fisherman's knot? Why not a Snell knot on a circle hook?
I've got Snell knots on my circle.
Oh, you do?
Some of them are, yeah.
Well, that one I was just looking at.
Well, again, there's more than one. But anyhow, I do Snell some. But the question, the answer on a Snell knot, yes, sir, this is a Snell knot right there. Anyhow, yeah, it is.
Okay,
no, maybe it is. Hang on. No. I take it back. Take it back. That's a uni knot. But I do Snell a lot of hooks. I don't think I hook as many fish on a Snell knot, although it's a lot prettier than a uni knot. So you had a question.
What size circle hooks do you use?
7/0 for tarpon.
7.
Correct. Now, if I'm fishing baby tarpon, which I love to catch, and I chum them with live sardines like I would snooker redfish for them. Again, nose hook bait. All with tarpon, I have a far better success ratio of getting them hooked in the button or in the corner of the mouth with a nose hook bait. I get hit with a belly hook, but I don't catch it. And so I keep pretty close records about how the day went and all that. Yes, sir.
One more question. Do you chum when you're at the bridges? Do you chum pieces of the thread fin?
Okay, that's called chuck bait fishing. And so there are times when I do and times when I don't. I don't when there are a lot of mackerel around, because the mackerel will hit the hook, and if he doesn't slice the leader off, he'll weaken it,
Yeah.
There's no one set pattern, sir. The tarpon are there and they're active, they don't need to be chunked. All they need to do is just look at that thread fin not being moved down beside that structure, and he'll eat it. He'll eat it if you can leave it alone. You know, sometimes you got to leave it alone 20 or 25 minutes, but he'll eat it if you can leave it alone. Just like a big snook.
So
if you know you got a big snook in a hole out there, if you can put that bait out there and leave it alone, don't check it, he'll eat it.
But with the currents, it's gonna just keep going back, or you?
I don't understand that question at all.
You said you're throwing it out there and just go with the currents?
No, sir. My boat's anchored. I'm fishing right off the back of the boat. I'm not casting. I let them down, and then I put them in the rod hole, and I have just enough weight on that to keep the hook and the bait at the level that I think the fish is going to feed. Now, I may have, if it's a real strong current, I may have one bait with a 3/8 ounce egg sinker that's right against the eye of the hook. I may have another bait that is a 1/4 ounce, and I may have a third one that's a half, if it's a real strong tide. And then you know what weight it is, and when you get hit, you make the change to the other gear to what got hit. But you're not casting. You know, you're putting your bait out and leaving it alone. We all want to actively fish. Everybody wants to cast and crank. We all think we can fool that fish by the way we twitch that rod tip. In the natural scheme of things, that tarpon has gotten to be 150 or 160 pound by eating natural bait that are not being twitched. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, of all of the habits that the average charter client has, working a bait is the worst. Because if you're fishing into a school of fish, they may not just be ready to feed. If you put a bait in there and leave it alone, in 15 or 20 minutes, that magic deal that makes every deer in the woods walk out within 10 minutes of each other happens to that same fish. It's the same cycle. It's just underwater or terrestrial. I mean, I've deer hunted my whole life, and I can never explain why you look in a field for 4 hours and there's nothing except a crow or something. And then you look away, or you look at your phone and get the message, and you look up, there's 10 deer in the field. You explain how that happens. Because they all come from, a lot of them come from different directions. I don't know how it happens. I know today we had one of the best giant snook days I have had in years. And I knew the fish were there, and I couldn't make them go, and I couldn't make them go, and I couldn't make them go, and I couldn't make them go. And my client said, "Why are we here?" I said, give it a little time. And they kept working the bait. So I took my rod, and I took a rod, and I made a very long cast. And the guy went to reach for my rod. I said, "That's mine. And you fish yours. You leave that one alone." And then a minute, down it went. And that ended up being the biggest stuff he's ever seen or caught. So, and then he went on to catch 5 more that were really, 4 more, 5 all total, that were really, really, really big. Really big. And so, again, if you're chunk fishing, if you know a catfish has got it, reel it in and change the bait. Don't check your bait. Or check your bait every 20 or 25 minutes. But if you're properly fishing, even if you're chunk bait fishing, and again, the way I do it is putting rods in rod holes. Because if it's in somebody's hand, they're going to move the rod, they're going to crank the reel, they're going to look around, and just going to do, and you're dealing with an 8-foot rod. So if you put the rod out here, and all of a sudden somebody just takes the rod and look at there's a pelican or a porpoise. So that rod, that bait has come 16 feet. So, you know, if somebody really wants, if they just want to fish, I don't harass them. If they want to catch a fish, then the way to catch a fish is put the bait out and leave it alone. If a catfish gets it, bring him in, unhook the catfish, put another chunk bait out there. But don't cast here and then in 5 minutes cast over there and in 5 minutes cast over here. Don't do that. Not on tarpon, because they survive by avoiding being killed. That's the only way they survive. And if you notice, some of the a snook's got an eye that big around. A tarpon's got an eye that big around. A deer's got an eye that big around. What do? When they sense their environment is not comfortable, they don't ask questions. They're gone. And that's what tarpon do. And I have a trolling motor on my boat. I fish a 23.5-foot Ranger. My trolling motor is 36 volts and 115 pounds of thrust.
Wow.
And I never run my trolling motor above a third power on tarpon. When I was a young guy, I was very fortunate to have some really good fly fishermen to mentor me. Some of the biggest names that have ever saltwater fly fished. And I got hung up with the homosassa fly rod tarpon disease. Spent thousands of dollars on saltwater fly tackle for tarpon. I had the Earl Waters air switch deal where the biggest we could get then was 70-pound thrust. But I had 2 of them, and I had 2 batteries on each one, and I bet I put 3,000 miles on a push pole on a tarpon skip. And it just seemed to me like from most fly rod guys are Western Mountain or New England fishermen. They use 3 or 4 weight fly rods. Throw a fly that big to a fish that long, and they talk about it for 3